All right, friends. So we're back with another episode of My Pilgrimage podcast. It's been a little while. I apologize. Things have gotten a little busy here in Hawaii as we open back up and tourism is booming. And so luckily my family's company is making some money again, and it's a good thing. Seth has also been kind of slamming on some new projects. So all that said, we definitely we heard the cries. We are definitely going to try and keep these podcasts going as often as we can. And I think I promised you guys at least every other week. So I will get back on that and do my best. Today, we're talking about integration. It's a question that's been coming up in the Facebook group quite a bit, but it's also come up in my own life personally over the last couple months. I tell the story during the conversation, and Seth and I talk a lot about what integration is, what it looks like to be a fully integrated person. And so I think you're going to find this pretty helpful.
A lot of people, everybody's doing levels of work. And I think that there are a lot of people that want things to be fixed, right? Mm-hmm. They get into the space and they want things to be fixed. So I'll just start with a little story. A few weeks ago, I discovered through my own kind of meditation work and stuff, a piece of myself that was a kind of a small repressed part of myself. I would say if I was going to put an age on it, I would say he was a high school kid, the high school Dave. Very much a young high school part of myself that was very curious sexually and wanted to understand and everything and wanted to know everything and was trying to wake up that way. Like, this is like not just hitting puberty Dave. This is more like, 15, 16-year-old Dave and trying to explore the world. Because that's really when you wake up to trying to explore the world sexually, like trying to understand, oh, wow, like it's not just like I have a wet dream, or something like that. And stuff happens. It's, females, like there's these women, like these girls, this is a thing you do with somebody. And it's that whole first waking up to that whole experience. And, that kind of was a piece that was still kind of like, no, that's not okay. It's not okay. The ironic thing is that right at the same time, I got a friend request on Facebook from an ex-girlfriend, the first girl that I had sex with. And and I was like, what? Out of nowhere, right? So it's 26 years, since this year. And I was like, that's weird. I tell Maria, and I was like, yeah, I got this. She's like, really? And I was like, yeah. I said, there was this just kind of ironic little part of myself that kind of woke up. So, and the only person I ever had sex with besides my wife was her. And it was very much teenager sex, but it was just coated in guilt and shame and just Christian, just religious, just tons of guilt. So every bit of exploration was followed up immediately with just intense shame. And so this part of me kind of came out, and knowing what I know now about the way things kind of work, when it kind of comes out, it starts expressing itself. It was weird. I was finding myself saying things because I'm not shaming it, right? It comes up. I can feel this piece of me that's a bit out of control and inside and internally. And it was, but I'm observing it. And I'm watching it, but it's also like I was saying like everything sounded sexual for like a week. Mm-hmm. Like Maria would say, hey, it's time for dinner or whatever, and everything in my head would be,
boy,
yeah, exactly, it would be sexual. And I would say it though, and she just look at me, and finally, like, after a couple of times, she's like, how long is this going to last? Because this is like highly inappropriate. And I was like, I'm sorry. I'm like, I don't even know where that came from. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. You know what I mean? She'd walk by and grab her ass and I'd be like, and she'd say, okay. And she said, the kids are everybody, what are you doing? And I was like, finally I said to her, I said, can I talk to you about this? And I mentioned it. I said, I'm just going to call it Horny Dave. Okay. Horny Dave. And she's like, okay. I said, so I got this piece of me that it's not integrated.
Can we call him Horn Dog Dave? Horn Dog Dave.
Yeah, if you want to. That's that for podcast purposes.
Yeah.
But I have essentially what was happening was there was a piece of me that I was expressing itself, and it wasn't fully integrated into, I guess what you could say, it hadn't come home in the full sense. Like it's like almost like there was this piece, and he was like, I'm free. And he was aware that he was free and not being judged.
Right.
And so very much like
his needs.
Yeah, very much like a teenager gets his driver's license or somebody who like gets that first taste of freedom. there's just this intense desire to explore the space,
Yeah.
I think that the difference between what I do now and what I would have done before is that stuff would have all happened subconsciously, like in the unconscious, and it's expressing itself unconscious, which is what we talk about when it comes to addiction, right?
Sure.
I go on the internet, I search for big boobs. The part of me that's searching for big boobs is not the part of me that's going to be hanging out with my wife later on, right? It's just not.
Right.
It's this thing, that split thing that we all deal with. And so for those of our people, that our friends that are in my pilgrimage that are still, looking at internet porn, or they're kind of searching and stuff like that, you have to just understand, first and foremost, the part of you that's doing the searching and that's feasting on the medication that needs the medication is not the part of you that later on is at the worship service in church.
Right.
It's not the same part.
Right. That's where the guilt and shame comes from, is your ego trying to reconcile the two.
Yes, exactly. That's really well said too. Like, that's where the guilt and shame comes in, is that the two don't get to have a good conversation, and they're not hanging out in the same space. They're trying to stay away from each other. And that's not how the human psyche works. No. Human psychology requires
guilt or shame.
Right.
Or it's going to be dissociation.
Right.
Where you start to split.
Yeah.
And that's why what we're talking about today is so important.
Right. And so so when those two come into the same space, that's called integration. Right.
Well, when that part of you, what happens is essentially your soul has to actually be able to reintegrate take that part of you that's expressing those needs and actually reintegrate it into the whole. But it literally, it ends.
It ends, right. It
fuses. It fuses into. That's a good way to put it. Because people will go, well, you have to still acknowledge that part of you. And this is where what you and I are talking about. What you do clashes a bit with popular psychology, because psychodynamic therapy and most popular psychology would say we want to acknowledge and we want to love those parts of us.
Right.
But they don't actually go far enough to integrate the part of us. And we were talking earlier about, there was a guy that expressed it on a page a few weeks ago, was talking about who was clearly in therapy, and was talking about an experience of how he just felt like he was dealing with this inner child, younger child. Yeah. And he felt like he was just crying all the time. And it's very important for him to understand that the tears he's crying are not his tears. Right. He is crying the tears of the young one because he's connecting to him, but not integrating him. Once you integrate that child into your soul, that those tears end, because the need is met forever.
And we're gonna talk about how to do that. Yeah.
Well, I want you to continue. Did you fully integrate that piece of you?
Yeah. So this how I do that is I tend to do that. This is my process for that. I sit with it. I sit with them. Yeah. So in my meditative practice, I'll sit with them, and I just basically imagine me sitting on a stool or chair or something. There's actually this red seat that I sit on in my bedroom, and because it gets this wonderful morning light, and I like to meditate in the morning, and I just sit with my eyes closed. I'll put my hands out, my palms out, and I'll imagine him sitting in front of me, and I invite him to put his hands in mine. Yeah. And that's just what I do. So I'll sit with him, and I'll just invite him in, and I'll say, "You're safe here. There's no shame." What I found that when I do that is that they just eventually kind of go, "Oh, cool," and they just kind of step in, and then it's almost like they go quiet, they fuse, and it's like all of a sudden they no longer either have this need to express, or they just, like you said, they just kind of fuse and disappear, because they're not. And what always ends up happening is I feel more my age after. Right. You know what I mean? I feel like, so I'm 45, and I would say that the kind of a full integration took place a couple of weeks ago, in which I was like, oh, I'm no longer saying inappropriate things or walking around. Everything sounds like, I feel very grounded. Yeah. And I feel grounded in the age that I am. So all of a sudden I feel 45, and I even look in the mirror and I feel more grounded and go, that's a 45-year-old man, and I'm enjoying being 45. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And
well, that's the remarkable thing, is that you've never been 45 before, and you realize that.
Right. Not fully 45.
Not fully 45.
Yeah. And I would say for me, like, because I've been doing this work for a long time, I was like, I feel mostly 45.
Mostly 45.
Oh, yeah. But yeah.
It's big difference between mostly 45 and all 45.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, that's
all
the thing.
45 is only one thing you can do.
No, that's the funny thing is that most this is why I tell clients that all the time.
Right.
I go, we'll do a soul integration or 2 or 3 or whatever. And then afterwards they're sitting there just going, whoa. And I go, yeah, you're a little more 32 than you were yesterday.
Right. Okay. So can you tell a couple stories kind of about, not obviously not using names or whatever, but about client integration, like when you're working with somebody, what you see and how you see that works? Because maybe that'll be something helpful for everybody when they're going, I keep looking at, they start asking that question. I looked at porn again. How old was the you that was looking at the porn? Yeah. How old is the you that's searching for that? Just ask that simple question. And then like, what would you?
And if most people contemplate that question and then begin to feel, okay, and it's really about a feeling, they'll come up, I've had people go, well, I don't know the answer. I go, I'm not asking you to know, just feel it. What's your instinct tell you? Right. And they're like 12.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. And the thing is, it starts with the chakras. Okay. It's important we understand that we got these magnetic fields in our system, and each chakra kind of governs certain things. Right. And so, but if you feel any tightness if anybody's listening, if you feel a tightness in your solar plexus or an ache in your solar plexus or a tightness in your throat, okay, those two chakras are connected. And if those two things are firing up, everybody's like, I always have a lump in my throat. That is a younger part of you presenting. That is a younger part of your soul. That's how it actually presents in that chakra, in those two chakras. Okay. And what it is, what happens, honestly, bro, is that a lot of times, especially, and this is just from what I'd say is a pretty decent body of work at this point. What I've discovered is that when someone's really far down, quite a ways down this road, like you are, where they've done a real bulk of healing, you'll tend to discover little pockets where you'll hit something, and there's probably more than one soul integration in that space. Sure. So there's probably several young parts of you in that space. Like if you were to come over here right now and I said, hey, let's go over to the old neighborhood, and we went and we sat in front of the house that we grew up in. Mm-hmm. And I had you meditate, just sit down on 3rd Avenue right there and had you meditate, you'd probably find 8 parts of yourself. Sure. I mean, so you'll find them in certain pockets. You'll find them in pockets where as opposed to one comes home. Usually I found that people, like when I'm working with someone who's really experienced and has done a lot of healing, and they haven't, they'll go a year and a half, 2 years without finding anything. And then they'll hit a trigger, and then it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of soul parts. Sure. And I think that's because at first most people have so much trauma that it's just like, it's like manna from heaven. They're everywhere. You know what I mean? And you can just start healing. Because pretty much most people are triggered most of the time. Yeah.
And that was definitely my situation. I think your situation too, like right at the beginning, it was just like, boom,
all you have to do is sit still for a second, and you find, oh shit, there's a part.
Which is what I'll say is that a lot of people kind of that have been doing it for a little while, they tend to, there's a frustrating period in there because at the beginning, when you first kind of open up and start healing, it's a bit of a high, right? You're so like, wow, and it's all flowing out, and you're just like, wow, it's incredible.
Well, and very quickly your ego starts looking for it wants to, I call it the flag planting phenomenon. It wants to plant the flag and go, we did it. And it starts looking for the finish line. Yeah. No matter what, like, where
we have our friend that we were talking about earlier that really he's just looking around for flags to plant. And he gets frustrated when he plants one, he goes, done. Right. And then 2 weeks later, he's like, no, like he's in a fight with his wife or something like that,
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, and that's really one of the hard parts of the journey is eventually come to the point where you just let that go completely. Yeah, exactly. I hit
the need to plant a flag is what I'm saying. Yeah, you let that go.
Yeah, and you realize, I've been doing this 12 years just about, and I heal on a level that most people don't, and part of that's because of what I do for a living stimulates that so much. Right. I'll give you an example from myself. I was, when we were kids, I had a skateboard, remember? And I last summer, my daughter got into skateboarding. She wanted a skateboard for her birthday for some reason. So I got her one, and she got into skateboarding, and then eventually she was like scared of it. She wanted to ride her scooter because she felt safer. Well, I find myself kind of kicking around on her skateboard, just like trying to learn some stuff. I'm watching these skateboarders move around the park, and I'm going, man, it just looks like so much fun to learn how to do that. And I start kind of kicking around, and one day I was like, my body was having a hard time with it. I could tell there was anxiety, there was a tension, and I just kind of chalked it up to, well, you fall, it hurts, right? It's not snow, it's not water. So anyway, I finally just said, you know what, that's it, I'm going to do it. And I actually got online and I bought 4 skateboard lessons. And when I hit the button to pay for it, my body seized up a little bit. Sure. And that night, I woke up in the middle of the night, about 3:00 in the morning. I woke up with anxiety, like serious anxiety in my chest, and my brain was racing with thoughts of crashing. And all I could do was replay over and over and over. Trying to do something and just smashing into the ground. And I was like, what in the world? And I'm like, okay, but all right, I know how to do this.
Right.
And I started just accessing my own tools. And I actually, that one, it was weird because I didn't quite know where to go because it was a bit overwhelming. So when it's overwhelming for me, I just ask spirit. So I kind of picture myself sitting down in that lotus position, similar to what you're describing. And I said, just spirit, show me what this is and where to go with it. And immediately I was taken back. Literally, it was kind of magical. Actually, I was taken straight back to a memory that I'd repressed. Now, I don't know why I didn't just remember this, but in 5th grade, I'm sure you remember, I had a massive skateboard accident.
Yeah, huge.
Huge. I mean, I was out cold for a long time. I was laying on the road for like an hour until strangers dragged me to the side of the road and waited for me to wake up so we could get my phone number to call my mom. But of course, no cell phones, right? But we literally I literally went back to that space and I saw that part of me laying on the road. Right. And he was 10 years old. He's laying on the road and there was an entity standing right over him. And it was like cloaked, black, the whole 9 yards. And I'm like, it's just dark. Right. And I'm like, what are you doing here? And he's like, I look after him.
Right.
And I'm like, all right, you're not needed anymore. And I just raised my hand and just super bright light out of my hand, and it literally just burst into light. And then I scooped him up and walked over the side of the road, and he kind of looked at me and I go, I'm really sorry I left you here. I don't know why I forgot. Right. And I mean, I'm up all night kind of in and out of this thing. And it was about probably 6 in the morning. And I just looked at him, and what I did is I saw myself put my hand on his heart. And I imagine light. And what I've discovered is that those parts of us don't always recognize where they come from.
Sure.
Because they've been stuck outside. And I'd have to get into the quantum physics here, but they get stuck outside the space-time continuum. Okay. So it's important to understand that the soul is timeless. It's subatomic. Okay. It doesn't do linear space and time. It does non-linear space and time. So the future is now, past is now, location is abstract. It's everywhere. Okay. But it rides inside the car. Okay, which is the body, and the body works in linear space and time, and that's where what's known as the space-time continuum, right? That's where the soul jumps onto that space-time continuum. So you have to imagine the soul riding in a car. The car is in linear space and time. When you're traumatized, okay, even mild forms of trauma, you're 2 years old, you get lost in the grocery store for 90 seconds. Okay, that trauma can cause a fracture, and essentially a part of you breaks off and falls out of the car. Mm-hmm. So now it's stuck outside the space-time continuum. It's back on the side of the road, and it's stuck in a time loop experiencing that trauma all the time.
Right. Which is why we have such vivid memories of trauma.
Right. And and even when we don't have conscious memories, because the ego has been able to repress it, we have the body remembers, right? Okay.
The body remembers it. Yeah.
Everybody's remembered that book. There's a really important book called The Body Remembers, right? The body remembers.
The body keeps the score.
Body keeps the score. That's right.
The one.
Body keeps the score.
Yeah. Fantastic book.
Yeah. See, so you're moving forward in space and time. And so the part of me that was stuck on that road, it didn't really express itself until I jumped on a skateboard, which was what was remarkable. I hadn't done a soul integration in probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And boom. Now the interesting thing is I hit a pocket. So it's like mining, I hit a vein, I hit a vein because I had several skateboard accidents, and I had, and what happens is trauma tends to pile on top of itself. So that part of you that you found, the Horn Dog Dave, that part of you that found it, there were other Daves that got piled on top of him because trauma kind of creates a snowball effect.
Sure.
Where now a traumatized part of you has to carry another traumatized part of you, and that trauma continues to get pervasive. And so it's this unique thing where we'll hit these little pockets. I ended up doing, within the next probably 2 weeks from that event, I probably did 8 soul integrations.
Sure. Yeah.
And it was really, really unique because it was all kind of around this certain period of my life when I was riding a skateboard a lot. And some of the parts that I brought home were directly connected to skateboard accidents. And some were just parts that were involved in skateboards because skateboards became traumatic for me after that moment.
Right.
And every time I'd step on one, there was fear.
Yeah. Sure.
Every single time there was fear and there was anxiety. So there was this trauma upon trauma kind of experience. And to this day, I still am finding some because I went and got myself pads. I mean, what's weird is when I did that soul integration, I woke up and because what happens is I bring that light into it. and the resonance of that light inside of him and that light inside of me, eventually they kind of recognize it.
Sure. Yeah,
I said, are you ready to come home? And it kind of looked at me and it was ready. I hug him nice and tight, and then it just will feel him absorb right in my body. What happens is they come right into the solar plexus chakra, and then you'll feel your heart just go like a flower. Right. It opens up like a flower. And I literally will open my eyes, and my daughter, kind of creepy way, she's standing right next to my bed. It's like 6 a.m. and she's like, look at me. I go, do you want to go to the skate park? She goes, yes. I get out. We go straight to the skate park. We're the only ones there, of course. And I start riding. I just felt free.
Yeah.
No fear. Yeah. And I'm like, whoa. And I'm going fast and I'm moving. I'm like, whoa, this is amazing. Yeah. And started pushing myself beyond the boundaries. And it was funny because when I work with pro athletes, it's very similar, because we'll integrate these parts of them that are stuck on these little soccer fields as kids trying to earn their parents' love. Yeah. And they'll bring, I had a kid named Mason Toy. Okay. And he wouldn't mind me saying his name. I was working with him, and he's playing for Montreal. If anybody wants to know, CFM Montreal in Major League Soccer. Yeah. And we're doing during the off season, and he was doing at least two soul integrations per session, every session. And because he's in practice every day, and his soccer is the main source of his trauma as a kid. Right. And so he's in training at a pro level every day, which means he's triggered as hell every day. Right. And so we're just boom, 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 boom. I mean, he did like 10 soul integrations in 8 weeks. And what's weird is his career was tanking.
And let me just pause for a second, just so we're clear with the audience. When we say 10 soul integrations, we're talking about 10 small parts of him.
Small parts of him, various ages. And that's the weird thing is that this is where I always tell people, like, listen, spirit lines them up, you knock them down. Okay. I say it like that because
that's good. I like that.
The spirit, your spirit. Okay. When I say your spirit, I mean the spirit. There is no separation. Okay. Spirit is a highly intelligent operating system. Okay. So when we start using our spirit through spiritual practice and we start turning our attention to it, the first thing spirit does is reorganize the system. Okay. Right. Ego looks at the system, stuffs it in a trunk, and starts making shit up and stories to manage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. It's like a trunk, lock it, put a bunch of stickers on it.
Yeah. And going, like smiley faces all over it. And then buy a new car kind of thing.
Yeah, and then buy a new car.
Do that.
A car will do it. Yeah, the car.
Create stories, just have sex another use some porn. It creates narratives to keep it in the trunk, or even stick it in separate rooms or whatever, and lock the doors. Spirit opens everything up and starts bringing it up in a very organized fashion. And it starts reorchestrating your life and your external circumstances in order to help create the right triggers, in order to read these things up, so that we can integrate the pieces, get the bad shit out, bring the good shit home, and so that your internal system realigns internally. And the physics of it is that once your internal system realigns and the vibration raises, then the external world has to shift, because on a quantum physics level, your external world is a direct mirror of your internal vibration. So reorganizes the internal so that the external. So when we talk about abundance or whatever, you're like, well, I just want to have a life of abundance and happiness, joy, money, all that kind of stuff. Well, the spirit does it by realigning you internally so that it shifts externally, and then you become a happy rich person instead of a miserable rich person. Where the ego is like, get money, will be okay, but then you have this dissonance of the trauma internally, and the ego can't solve that problem. So what happens is I hit a pocket, because I decided, and this is where desire comes into it. I decided that I wanted to be able to ride a skateboard. Yeah. And Spirit's like, well, you can't, because of this. There's this thing left undone over here. Several things, it turns out. Yeah. And so it took me into that space, which is super cool, because that just makes me that much more of a capable creative person, that much more of taking risk, that much more of handling failure. Turns out if you're good at handling failure, and you're good at learning from it, you can accomplish pretty much anything.
Yeah.
But that's what it is. And it's important that we understand that most therapy, okay, for those of you guys who are seeing traditional therapy out there, most therapy takes you to the edge of that cliff, but doesn't push you over. Right. Even psychodynamic therapy, which I think is one of the deeper forms, it still doesn't necessarily make room for the energetic experience. This is why a lot of therapists, dude, I have therapists who are clients who are frustrated because they're going, we almost heal. Everybody almost heals.
Right. But
does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. The thing that I've found with a lot of talk therapy, especially, is it's really easy for your ego to go to talk therapy. I mean,
easy.
Your egos love talk therapy a lot of time. They just love
and egos love spirituality. Egos love everything, as long as we don't pay attention to the ego. That's why every person I say, like, listen, this is half energy work, half ego work. If we do one but not the other, this isn't going to work.
Right. Yeah.
We can do a shitload of energy work, and then your ego just gets super enlightened.
So for our friend in the group who's going to therapy and finding that he's hitting a wall,
yeah,
you can ask yourself when you walk into your therapist's office, like just become aware of your ego, like in that moment, and go, okay, you're here too. Yeah. Okay, great. You don't get to be like talk today, or you don't get to be the guy, calling the shots in therapy.
Well, and one of the problems is that here's the thing. What's unique about it is that the entire system is set up that what you'll have is, okay. So I went to grad school. Okay, in my grad school, the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology. I love this place. I adore this place. It's a sacred place to me. Yeah. And 85% of the students there are there to get a master's in counseling and psychology. I did not get that. I got a master's in theology and culture. Okay, but they do a counseling and psychology, and they crank out some really, really, really good therapists.
Yep.
But they don't do soul integration. They don't do the energetic work. And so what they do is what you get is people with profound levels of self-awareness, but the ego is still intact fully, and the trauma is still in place, but they can describe it all and create it all, and they've created a much better story for themselves. And there's an acknowledgement of their ego, and there's an acknowledgement of the trauma, but it's all still operating. Mm-hmm. And so what we don't understand is that eventually you become an enlightened ego, and you can tell the story.
That's an interesting term.
Yeah. And Adyashanti says there's nothing worse than an enlightened ego. And I would agree with that because you can tell the story of all your health, but not feel it. And so what happens is that kind of, there's still an existential crisis that's going to come because eventually it's not working. You're not happy. And I've watched it, and you find out the second you get a few drinks in them or something like that. Or
this reminds me of your friend Peter, who's written a bunch of books. But then when you're in a pub with him hanging out, he's like, I'm fucking miserable.
I'm fucking miserable. And it's funny because, like, I remember I was intentionally wanted to see him drunk because I was like, I'm really curious what he'll say. And so I kept pointing at the waitress going, and they kept bringing him drinks. And that was the thing, is eventually he's like, and I actually saw him when he spoke at Princeton one time, and he spoke in a class, in a philosophy class, a philosophy student had said to him, what's your self-critique? And eventually he said, my self-critique is it's not working. I've asked this philosophy that I can't be happy to make me happy, and it's not working. And so he does a lot of psychoanalysis, and he has a high level of self-awareness. But the problem is that what will happen is you'll still have these deep unconscious barriers to the thing you really want to do, and you just create a more therapy oriented kind of backstory to the entire process. But that's the thing, is if we want to move beyond self-awareness, where it's like that kind of like you see in the scriptures, I was blind, now I'm healed. Where there's just a shift in the experience. Like you're saying, I'm a little more 45 than I was. And you want to experience that life where the fear just isn't there anymore.
Sure.
Like the desire for porn just isn't there anymore, or it completely shifts in a different way. Like that's the thing that we want to come into, and we want to come past that space. And there's a lot of people, like, we have, we were talking about some friends earlier, where you get a super robust ego. Like I have a super robust ego, highly intelligent. I mean, I can run through freaking walls. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if I don't come into an awareness of that and directly confront that, then I just become a super highly enlightened ego. And then I can sit here on the stage, and I could get up and I can do a podcast, and I can write, and I can speak, and people read my book, and I can teach that. And my ego will adopt all of it to keep me alive.
Right.
And then it does. And what it does is it ends up doing subtle damage to other people. It does damage to especially the ones you love the most. Like they're the ones that have to carry the burden, while your audience is out here thinking you're super enlightened is actually, so this is what we see with so many pastors, right? So many pastors, like everybody, once they have the affair or whatever, everybody's going, they're so shocked, oh, I'm going, what did you expect?
I've come to expect it. Yeah. It's weird. It's weird now to go, well, okay, I wonder how long it'll take for that guy to.
Yeah. They're just, and that's the thing, is what you have is just massively enlightened egos. Right. Massively enlightened egos, but the trauma's still there, and the chickens always come home to roost. Right. Always.
Yeah, that's interesting, man.
Yeah, that's the thing. And so the reason my reputation, for instance, is growing in the sports world, and it is, a lot of guys in my pilgrimage community don't know that that's my thing. Like I work with people in my pilgrimage community. I work with all kinds of everyday people, but in the professional sports world, my reputation is starting to expand, and guys are telling, because we're doing soul integration, and these athletes are having dramatic shifts, like dramatic, like within 3 months, they go from can't get off the bench to world beaters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what's happened to Mason right there. First 2 games of the season, pop, goal, goal. And yesterday he was injured, so he didn't get to play, which sucks. But he's just like, he said, I'm, and the coolest thing is he's like, I'm having the most fun I've ever had playing soccer before. And I hear that regularly. It's like I'm a kid again.
Yeah.
I get to enjoy this objectively fun thing. I get to play.
Right.
Because
and
all those kids that were so scared are home now and their needs are met.
It's for us and people that are normal people that don't have like Ferraris for bodies, you know, we get to just enjoy things like skateboarding and for me, frankly, sex is like, you know, there's been this incredible, you know, experience of that, you know, and
because 45-year-old sex is the best, is amazing.
The best sex there is.
It's a very different kind of sex than when you talk about teenage sex, you know. I think there's a lot of guys in their 40s still having teenage sex.
Totally. Oh, dude, that's such a common,
that's such a common experience.
That's exactly, especially for Christians, because this is the thing, part of the experience that I've had over the last couple of weeks was that I was realizing that I guess the 14, 15-year-old Christian, especially the dudes, but the women too, everybody, you know, we were so steeped in shame when we wanted to have sex. It was just like when we had the desire to have that. And so that shift, you know, in the conscious space got pushed to marriage. I wanted to find the girl so that I can marry, so that I can have sex, because we gotta do it in order. But the true desire was like, I want to have sex. I want to do this. I want to have a sex with the thing, with, you know, and yet we couldn't do any of that or even have those desires without the intense shame, that kind of the guilt that went around with it.
Right.
So,
Well, that's why the narrative of we got to get married. Right. Because then we can finally get rid of that dissonance. But of course we got in there and then a new thing arose up.
And it got worse.
Well, it got worse. And because all of a sudden intimacy becomes a thing in teenage sex. Intimacy is not a really thing. It's only selfish
exploration.
It's like, you know, and which is normal. Like you got teenagers, right? I've got young ones. Like you can't expect your kids, their egos are still developing. Their spirits are just coming online. They're not capable of love and intimacy like we want them to be.
No.
They can do kid intimacy. My daughter can't love me.
Right.
She can say those words and but she only needs me. Right. And my ego can design some narrative that she loves me, and then I can try to maybe get my needs met through her or something like that. But the truth is, like, it can only be selfish, and that's not to be, don't feel guilty about that. No. The teenage sex can only be a selfish kind of sex.
Yeah, they can't, because it's all exploration, and your awareness is totally in the moment of going, whoa, that feels good, and whoa, that feels good. Right. It's not like,
or it does the opposite thing where I'm just gonna give.
Yeah.
But it can't do both.
No, it can't.
You know what I mean?
No, you can't, and you certainly can't feel the you know what Rob Bell calls the zim-zum. You can't really have that experience where you're walking through it. You know, it's and it's funny because, you know, Maria was, you know, going, well, how do we do this with this guy involved? You know,
right.
I'm like, you know, I don't know. I'd skip it. But I found that now, like, you know, our sex life has turned into this extremely beautiful, loving, kind of incredible, like the zim-zum kind of more. I'm feeling that more. It's not that it's been a beautiful kind of couple of weeks. So,
Well, that's the thing. And that's the thing is, if we just continue to keep our awareness in that space,
right?
You know what I mean? We just constantly keep our awareness in that space. The soul integration gets easier.
Yeah.
Because you just become you're more aware, you're more alert.
When it comes up. And this is the thing that I want people to know, because I see a lot of people getting frustrated. They are still, if you're listening and you are waiting to arrive at the place in which all your problems are gone, that is a bullshit evangelical Christian narrative that's very, very similar to the when I die and get to heaven narrative. When I die and get to heaven,
every tear will be
everything will be perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Eternity.
Dude, how much did we hear that in our childhood? Every tear will be wiped away.
Every tear will be wiped away.
Yeah. Mom's still doing that. Mom is literally, that's her thing. Every tear.
You'll never cry again. I'm like, that sucks. That really sucks. That's a terrible, the narrative of that. Well, the narrative of that description is just, the description of that sounds like torture. And it's like that show, The Good Place was like that, you know, where you like, oh, now you're here in this perfect neighborhood for the rest of your life. And you're like that's going to last a week. And then you're like, and you want to blow your brains out, you know, because that's just not what it's not what it is to be human. And it's not like we're going to get transformed, into some other experience in this life. This is human life,
Yeah.
So like if you're waiting around if you find yourself, any part of you waiting around for it to be solved, for it to be fixed, then you've missed a little bit of what we're trying to
and if you've missed the pilgrimage, remember pilgrimage in the form that we're talking about, and it's in our whole visual motif. There's no destination.
Yeah, the beauty's all around you. It's there, and
that was the Celtic form. There's no destination. You just walk.
Yeah,
and that's how you find God.
Man, I'll tell you a really quick story to kind of wrap it, and then I'll let you close this out. I saw that like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. I was coaching the middle school basketball team in the gym. And then one of the moms comes walking in the gym and she says, hey, and there's balls bouncing everywhere. So I can't hear. She's yelling at me across the gym. And I'm like, what? And I come over and she says, I hit your car. And I'm like, what? And she says, yeah, because my car was parked kind of parallel in front of the gym. And she just was not, I don't know, whatever, tuned in. And she blindsided my car and like raked the whole side of it, And I was like, oh. And I'm like, well, are you okay? And she's like, I feel horrible. I just totally, I go out and sure enough, there's a lot of damage to the car. And luckily no one got hurt or anything. And it's all right. So I go to the body shop, they fix it. And then I'm driving home and I get, I'm on the dump road here. And so there's a long straightaway and I get to about 65 miles an hour and I hear this whistle. Then I'm like, oh, son of a gun. There's like wind coming through. But then I'm so busy and I'm so like, I don't want to, I'll call them later and I'll go back. But it's such a pain in the butt, because you have the kids and the school and everything that's going on in work. And so months go by and I haven't gotten it fixed. I've just gotten used to it. Now I'm just driving this all the time. And then the pandemic hits. And of course, now I can't go to the body shop. And then basically like a year and a half goes by of this whistle and it's driving me crazy. But now I'm thinking about like getting a new car and I'm like, I can't trade this in because ethically I'm like, I could say, well, I just won't tell them about it. But no, you got to tell them. And then that takes thousands off the trade-in price or whatever. So I'm like, I've got to go back. And then conveniently, my middle son, Noah, who uses my car to take the garbages down to the main road because we live up on a farm. And when the garbage truck won't come up our road because this is a beat up dirt road. So and then one day he runs the car into the house and does another $2,000 worth of damage to my car. And of course he's 15, he doesn't have his license. So I can't I can't have my insurance pay for that. So that's out of pocket. And so I'm like, so I call the body shop and they're like, yeah, bring it in. So I get there and I tell her, hey, by the way, there's this whistle. Can you fix the whistle? And they're like, yeah. So we do all the work and we figure out where the whistle is and we fix the whistle. And now I have this kind of clean sounding, like wonderful car, and driving the car is really, really lovely again. And it's just, I'm happy, right? But the point of the story is that while they're fixing the whistle on the car, this is just like last week, they said it'll take about 30 minutes. No problem. There's just this one piece they got to install. And I was like, great. Okay. So I'm going to take a walk. I have learned when I'm traveling around the world to take walks and just be present, in my walks. And I love walking in just random spaces. I'm in an industrial district, an industrial kind of area of Kahului or Wailuku, and there's nothing pretty about it from a Maui standpoint, but I'm just walking along and I'm noticing blades of grass and little trees and pieces of garbage on the ground and different things around and cracked sidewalks and I've learned to do that. And it's my favorite part of walking in a city, right? I walk past this neighborhood and I look up and there's this little window and this one of these warehouses and it says TJ's. And then there's a little sign underneath that says, voted best bento box in Maui. When it's a bento box, it's like a little Japanese box lunch, right? Use a little rice, a little fish, something like that. I was like, wow, geez, TJ's best bento box. So of course I walk in there and it's an Asian grocery store, which is a Hawaiian Asian grocery store is not the same as an Asian grocery store. An Asian Hawaiians took everything Asian, because there's so many that Chinese and Japanese and Filipinos and Okinawans that came here during the Hawaiian Kingdom to work in the sugarcane fields. So there's this kind of mishmash of cultures that are in this story, and it's come to be known as what we call Hawaiian food. People call Hawaiian food, and it's this own thing, and it's just this massive mishmash of Asian cultures and Hawaiian food and fresh fish and different things, So I'm in there and I'm like, wow, it's amazing. And I go back and of course I'm the only white guy in there, and I'm like a foot taller than everybody. And then there's this, and then there's all these bento boxes, and I get this bento box and I'm like, this is so cool. And I go sit in the car and I get a Japanese beer called a Fuzzy Kitty. And I, from Kyoto, or Furry Kitty or something like that. I go sit in the car, I go back, or not in the car, I go back and sit on the sidewalk, so I'm sitting on the sidewalk and I open up my little furry beer and my bento box, and I'm having this incredible, really just awesome chicken and stuff. And I was just sitting here, I was just as happy as a human being can be, sitting in this industrial district, eating this best bento box on Maui or whatever. And no tourists anywhere, because the tourists don't. I've never heard of it. I've lived, I've been coming here 20 some years. I've lived here for 4 years. I never heard of TJ's. And so, but it was reminding me, it was like, I'm sitting there eating the chicken and I'm enjoying the experience, but I'm also remembering all the little cities and towns that I've walked around, and I've been able to, because I've learned to be in that present space, just to enjoy each little thing around me. And that's what has brought so much. I think that's what brings so much joy, is that when you start doing that in your daily life, when you wake up in the morning and in the coffee and just the experiences even of the mundane and the experiences of the things that you're used to become joyful. And so, and I honestly, like, the more integrated we become as people, the more that becomes your natural experience. Yeah. And then you can stop looking for, oh man, I just want money and I just want to arrive at this place. You can stop looking for that and start enjoying the thing that you have. And I don't know, the sooner you get there, the better, in terms of being able to actually look around you and just enjoy what you have. So,
well, I want to give some some kind of energetic context to that.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. All right. So the Celts, they said that the face of God is reflected in a newborn child. Okay. Like, you can see, like, they have this reverence for the newborn, because the newborn is a whole. They say the soul is complete. Right?
But they didn't say it like that. They said it with an accent.
They said it in Gaelic, actually. I'm sure.
In Gaelic, right?
But the idea. Okay, so there's something that Carl Jung calls the mirror phase. Right around 7 months to a year is when a child starts to their ego starts to awaken.
Sure.
And that's why with a newborn, you can just pass a newborn around the room, and everybody can hold the newborn. Newborn's not freaking out, right? Because the newborn is one with everything, right?
Yeah.
And then the newborn starts entering into what some people call the state of separation, and they start going, "I'm not you, and you're not me, and I need my mom." Like, and they start, all of a sudden, there's that safety space that they get into. Then the soul starts taking on fractures. Right. And starts taking on fractures. So everyone exits those developmental years into junior high with so many soul fractures. And now you're a half developed ego at about 13. You're a half developed ego trying to handle all, and your trauma starts to emerge.
Yeah.
And your hormones are shifting, and you're all this kind of, and so that's why junior high is such a shit show. Right. And then you keep developing, and when you say the more integrated you are, the more capable you are doing this, because you return to that oneness that you experienced as a baby.
Right.
You're actually bringing back everything that was taken, and you become the whole soul again, but in a balanced and developed relationship with a fully developed ego. Your ego stops developing about mid-20s. And so the ego ultimately, if we're going to talk about it in a positive light, is meant to give form to everything. The baby doesn't have form, right? Yeah. That's why it's a complete abstract oneness, and that's why they're just kind of slobber monsters. They can't really do anything, right? Yeah. As your ego develops, you are able to give form to all that beautiful soul energy. So if you can be fully 45 with a very integrated soul and a very complete, balanced ego in that way, and you've done your work, you have this capacity to be a newborn baby that can do shit. Yeah. You know what I mean? Sure. If that makes any sense. So you are experiencing that bento like a baby would. Yeah. Completely present. Right. And that is the importance of the kind of reclamation of our souls. Is a very, very important part of everyone's evolution. But if we don't do that work, that's why energy, and of course, energetic work is becoming more and more and more and more accepted. Okay. More and more and more accepted. There's a good chance I'm going to be on staff with a Major League Soccer team by the end of the season, on a coaching staff doing energy work, because people are starting to recognize, like, okay, this is work, and more therapy is working. I got therapists coming all the time. I have PhDs asking me, psychologists asking me to teach them how to do this because they're going, my people aren't healing. And, you know,
Right.
I had a guy come to me, he's like, after 10 years, he's like, it's just not.
Yeah. We're starting to arrive there as a society in a,
Yeah.
you know, kind of going, oh, wow, this maybe is a huge part of the next evolution of the human experience, you know, is that all of us learn that this part of ourselves, and not just people who read Feels Like Redemption or whatever, you know, everybody.
But the problem is, and the problem is that there's no language yet given in the scientific space to be able to describe the experience properly without adopting languages of the ancients. So there has to be an integration of ancient teaching, of ancient wisdom traditions and understanding, and the psychedelics are coming in to help with that. There's all these kind of things happening, and the scientific community, which is kind of runs psychology for the most part because of studies and insurance and all this kind of stuff, is having a hard time allowing for that ancient language and
mystic language and stuff like that
and metaphysics, right? They don't allow for it. But it's an incredibly important part of it, and it's becoming. I mean, in 50 years, it'll be taught in elementary school.
Right,
people will start talking about it, and that's the whole thing. My kids, it's their normal understanding of the world. Like they're completely. They see souls and fractures of souls, and that my daughter can talk about herself. It's going, I think there's a little part of me that's really crying right now.
Right.
You know, yeah. And she's already done probably 5 soul integrations.
Yeah.
You know, and she's already learned. So this is the kind of thing, man, we're going to get there. And I'm glad we could talk about this, because I think that the ego's trying to keep it stuffed in the trunk. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
So I've had people come to me and go, well, I just think I'm going to do some more traditional therapy. You know, I go, okay, great. I'll see you in a couple of years then, I guess, you know? And because eventually you will want to be healed. You just want to be healed, and not a finish line healed. Just the thing that you're doing right now. I just don't want to. I want to stop wanting porn.
Right.
Yeah, great. Let's do that. And then of course there'll be a new challenge on the other side of that is even more beautiful, and you can just keep riding towards that sunset without ever getting to it, which is beautiful.
I mean, yeah, and just as a note to that, you know, people go, well, if it's just, you know, if there's not a finish point, then what's the point? And I'll go, well, the point is that there is no finish line. You know, you're still stuck in the mindset of like, you know, if I get rid of the porn, then I'll be happy, and that's the same thing as when I get the money, I'll be happy. When my book gets published, I'll be happy. If my kids would stop screaming, I'd be happy. And exactly.
That was my big one. Yeah. But I have to somehow get this tornado of a child under control. She's destroying everything. Yeah. And that's what I was saying earlier, coming to this realization that even though I can objectively look at what she's doing and going, this is insane. Anybody would walk in and go, holy crap, man. Like, your daughter's like, if I don't give her this candy right now, she hits the floor and starts, you know, I mean, just destroying the world.
Right.
Yeah. They'd go, well, that sucks. That's got to change. Well, yeah. But I still realize that I'm making her responsible for me.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I'm losing my temper. I sit around going, my life will never be peaceful until she changes. That's not true.
Right.
That's not true. And is it a high level challenge? Yeah, it is. It's a high level challenge. But
there are high level challenges, no doubt about it. Like there are people that are dealing with some really intense stuff. And
I got a guy right now who is in a marriage to a woman he doesn't love, and he wanted to leave her years ago and he didn't. And then they got accidentally pregnant with triplets. Oh. And he's been on SSRIs for 10 years. He's been in serious depression for a long time, extreme anxiety issues, and he's got serious acute trauma. He is dealing with a high level challenge. But he's built for it, and you can and as we worked, I can see it very clearly. Like, his soul actually lined this up. His soul was like, let's do this. Yeah. You know, like, there's an enlightenment availability in here if he makes it through without having a psychotic break.
Right.
Which I think he's going to be all right. He's going to be all right. So. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's good. That's it. There you go.
There you go.
Podcast. Done.
It's Sounders Game Day. This is the
Sounders Game Day. LA Galaxy.
Everybody tune in.
We need to win this one. I think there needs to be a statement.
I think we need to win this. We need to put Chicharito in this place.
Yeah.
Okay, friends. So there's your My Pilgrimage podcast integration. That's what we talked about. So try it yourself. If you feel like you have parts of yourself that are just not coming home, let's find out what those are. Start with that simple question. How old is this person inside of me? What do they need? And try sitting with it. Ask for help if you need it. you know, contact some of your friends or get on the Facebook page, or even just sit in meditation and ask, you know, Jesus or whoever you need to come and sit with you to help. But we want to bring those parts home so that we can be whole and integrated more of the age that we are. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. Leave your comments on the Facebook group. Let's just have some conversation about it. It's all good. So from the island of Maui, aloha.